Sometimes hearing loss has been present for some time and people are aware that they've got it. Sometimes it comes on slowly. And so people might start to find that they're struggling to hear in certain conversations. They may be missing words. Maybe colleagues say, oh, the TV started to become a bit louder. And sometimes it's things like I'm having trouble concentrating in meetings. Can be some of the signs that you've got a hearing loss and maybe you should go and get your hearing tested. So if we think about hearing loss, I think it's useful to first think about sound. Sound is a vibration, of course. It travels down the ear canal, moves deep inside, hits the eardrum, vibrates the eardrum, vibrates three little bones of hearing in sequence, and those three little bones then send that vibration into this fluid-filled structure deep inside the ear called the cochlea, where the sound is detected and then sent by signals to the brain. So the types of hearing loss you get can affect any of that part, but the typical things that might happen is there might be a problem with the eardrum itself. You might have a hole in the eardrum. It might be sucked in and deformed the eardrum as a result of previous infections. It could be that there's fluid deep to the eardrum, something called glue ear, very, very common in children, but can also happen in adults. It could be a problem with the bones of hearing. So one of those bones, particularly the second bone, can be damaged as a result of repeated infections. And there's another disorder called otosclerosis, which can affect that third bone called the stapes, the smallest bone in the body, and that can get fixed and stop moving, and typically in middle age. And then, of course, there can be problems with the deepest part of the ear, that fluid-filled structure that I mentioned before, and that is typical the cause of things like age-related hearing loss, where that goes over time, and that can be genetically determined. Sometimes people get that at an early age, and sometimes at a later age. So the age at which people will experience hearing loss does vary. If it's a problem with the deepest part of the ear, then it is usually something that comes in older life. So typically, people around the age of 60 or 70 will start to notice their hearing is now gone to the point where they're struggling. But our hearing actually starts to deteriorate from the age of 16. So even my children can hear some very high frequency sounds that I can't detect. But that's actually variable. So I've certainly seen some people who even in their 30s and 40s have started to develop hearing loss. And equally, I've seen people who are in their 80s and 90s with very good hearing. So it's very, very variable if it's age related. If it's that problem with the middle ear, as I said, the eardrum or the bones of hearing, again, that is quite variable. Often that is at a much younger age because people have had lots of ear infections when they were a child, and that's caused some damage to the eardrum or the bones of hearing. And so that may be present even in children or young adults. And that final thing, the bone of hearing, the otosclerosis affecting that final third little bone of hearing, that typically seems to be noticed around the age of 30 or 40. So there's different causes of hearing loss at different ages. So we do see some patients present with sudden hearing loss, that the hearing just goes altogether. And sometimes that can be following a cold, for example, the fluid builds up, but usually people start to notice that rather than it goes suddenly. There's another group of patients where the hearing just goes completely, very, very quickly over the space of minutes or even hours. And that's actually an emergency because we think there's a virus that gets into the ear. And the evidence suggests that you should have steroids as treatment for that because the chances of it recovering is improved. And that might be by mouth or quite often as well by injection into the eardrum to try and recover the hearing. Because unfortunately, in about 1 in 3 cases, as the hearing goes completely and suddenly it won't come back again. And we have to do everything we can to try and recover that. So there are opportunities to try and regain hearing or fix what we can, and that depends upon, of course, what's causing it. If there's a problem with the deepest part of the ear, then a hearing aid may be the best option for you to try and overcome what you've lost. It's not perfect. We know that because you can't replace everything that nature gave you, and particularly picking out sounds from background environments. A hearing aid is not very good at that. But what's important is actually sometimes there are other options. Certainly, if there's a problem with a hole in the eardrum or a sucked in eardrum or an eroded bone, so the bones are damaged or the bone is fixed, then surgery may be an option for you as well, where I can repair the eardrum, I can repair the bones of hearing with small little artificial bones to replace them. And so that's something that should be considered. And until you go and see someone and have a hearing test, they can determine what is likely the underlying cause and what the management options for you may be.